Hey, and a very warm welcome to the Into the LightWeb podcast with me, your hostess, Joanna Hunter, metaphysical teacher, spiritual life and business coach, published author, and the high priestess of the LightWeb, a spiritual technology that will change your life. This is the place to be to talk everything under the LightWeb, from consciousness, relationships, to money, to spiritual business, and everything in between. Hi, it's Joanna Hunter here from joannahunter.com, and you're listening to the Into the LightWeb podcast. And we are here with another episode of the gorgeous My $1 Million Lab series. And I have a really special guest this week. Her name is Nichole Wurth, and she teaches you how to become best friends with your body. And this interview had so many golden nuggets, so get your notepads out. I know you're going to want them. I will speak to you soon, and I hope that you really enjoy this episode. Hello, it's Joanna Hunter here for the Into the LightWeb podcast, and we have got another $1 Million Lab series for you. And I'm joined by the gorgeous Nichole Wurth, who is a body confidence coach. Warm welcome, Nichole. Come and say hi and introduce yourself to everyone.
Hello, I'm so excited to be here and to have this conversation with you.
Tell us a little bit about what you do as a body confidence coach. How did that come about, and what's it all about for you?
Yeah, so my company is called Wildly Alive, and Wildly Alive believes that your body is a living, breathing, feeling thing, just like a plant. So if every day I came in here and I looked at this plant and I said, ew, you're ugly and you're disgusting and I don't like you and you're not good enough. And then I also proceeded to not feed it properly or give it the things that it needed to properly thrive, that it would struggle. And I think that's where a lot of women are at with their bodies, is there's a lot of abuse. There's physical abuse by forcing you to drink tea when you're really hungry, forcing you to work out when you really need a rest, right? And looking in the mirror and having a lot of verbal and emotional abuse. And if we start to see that this thing is alive and she's listening and she's smart and she is so full of so much wisdom, then you unlock a potential of power that you never have before. Because I know for me, I don't think I would be able to, and I'm sure you can agree, is that if every day you were at war with your body, you wouldn't have the space, the emotional, mental space, energetic space to create what you really wanted. And, we really believe that your body is at the core of everything. So if you want to have a great romantic relationship, your relationship with your body is at the core of that. A great business, your relationship's at the core. Be a great mother, right? Your relationship with your body is at the core, because she is here to guide you on how to eat and how to move and the best business decisions. Yeah. And also the best ways to approach partnership and motherhood. And so, Wildly Alive's whole mission is to teach women how to get on the same teams with their body and learn how to heal their relationship with their body, because most women who come into this world have gone most of their lives feeling disgusted, disappointed, resentful. Our bodies also aren't able to give us everything that we want, and it could also be the culprit of a lot of pain. And so you have to do the healing work to be able to see that you are on each other's team, and there's so much energy being leaked by you fighting all the time. And so that's kind of the mission that we stand by.
I love that. It's a very similar message to one that we have in my book, Get Selfish, The Way Is Through. It's about getting yourself and really understanding and loving all of who you are, loving all the bits, the lumps and the bumps and all of it, and really, really being on your own team, really. Because what I realized as I went through what I call my Get Selfish journey that was my sort of really big healing journey. As I went through that journey, I realized, forget loving myself. I wasn't even my own friend. I was not even my own friend. I thought, I need to start there. I need to start with making friends first. Then we can maybe think about loving You know,
Yeah.
because people were saying like, you gotta love yourself. And I was like, scrap that. Like, I wasn't even ready for love yet because I didn't even like myself. So I needed to like, you know, I betrayed myself so many times. How many times had my body told me, Joanna, we're tired? And I was like, let's just push through. And, you know, and of course that led to my huge big burnout. So I love this message that you have, and that how, you know, it's so poignant. And one of the tools that we teach in the $1,000,000 experiment is what we call GSP, global soul positioning, where you're really listening to the energy field of your body. If it feels expanded, that's like a yes, yes, yes. And if it feels contracted, that's your body going, no, girlfriend, that's not a good idea. And so I love that you are really teaching the body wisdom of being able to listen to the body, because it has so much wisdom to give us. But you weren't always like this, because you had a bit of a tussle with the hustle as well, right?
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is, so I come from a very dieting background, and I had a very, dysfunctional relationship with my body, with food, with exercise, like across the board, very unhealthy, obsessive. I went under the knife and got plastic surgery just to like find my happiness. I didn't know it at the time that I was looking for happiness. I was just looking for perfection, because I was, we're sold this facade on, if you look a certain way, then, everything is the clouds are going to part and the money's going to fill into the bank account. The partner of your dreams is coming in. Yeah. And so I was I was a hustler through and through. So dieting was great for me. I mean, I was like the best dieter on the planet. I was super rigid, super type A. You tell me how many calories I could eat, then I'll stick to that. And I was like on it. And so I gained weight, and I lost majority of it through dieting. But what I realized is that with each diet that I did, it took a chunk out of my self-esteem. And I had a pretty solid self-esteem all through high school. I felt like I was a pretty confident person, but by the end of dieting, I was pitiful. I didn't trust myself at all. I needed a diet. I needed somebody to tell me what to eat and how to move. The diet culture is really based on breaking your relationship with yourself, because then you are dependent on them, right? Like the former CFO of Weight Watchers has said that 84% of their returning customers 84% of their profits are returning customers. So if they set you up to succeed, their business would go under. And so, like it's all about building that. And so obviously I had this very hustle energy. And I started sinking into the Wildly Alive philosophies. I started asking the questions, could this be easier? I'm not even really happy. I mean, if you would have looked at me, you would have thought, dang, she's got it going on. And I know that women probably looked at my body and was envious and thought I had something that they didn't. But the truth is that I looked good on the outside, but I was a mess. I was an utter mess. I was so afraid of food. I was afraid of getting fat. I was afraid of not missing my workouts. I would never have any fun. I was uptight. I was stressed out. I was burnt out. It was so unhealthy. And it made me realize again that like we get this vision of like, oh, this is what a woman is supposed to look like. And when she looks this way, she will be happy. I could no longer blame my body for all my problems, because before my body was the culprit of all my problems, right? And so I was like, oh, it's an easy equation. Fix my body, all my problems will be fixed. But then once I was looking good, I didn't have my body to blame. And that was like the fall to my knees moment. And I really started asking the question, could it be easier? And so then Wildly Alive started coming through, and I was personal training at the time, and I started going into coaching. And what was interesting with business is I started taking a very dieting approach to business, which I did not realize at first, right? But if you think about the masculine, feminine styles of business, I hired a coach who I didn't, realize at the time was very masculine. Conversion rates, numbers. It was all about like scaling. The more numbers you get, you just need to get this conversion rate. And so it became very transactional. I worked and I hustled really hard to get to six figures. And that six-figure mark was very much like the mark after I had gotten a boob job and thought that I was going to be happy and was like, okay, everything's perfect. So now I should be happy. Well, I remember going to my accountants in like January of 2016 and seeing my numbers, and we like doubled our numbers. And I wanted to cry because I had thought that once I hit six figures, I was gonna be so happy, like it was just like the six-figure coach, like it was just this thing, just like the body, just like the body. And I got there and I saw the numbers and I just wanted to cry because I was like, I am not happy. And I don't think I have it in me to do that again. Like I was working 80-hour weeks. I was just,
Oh my goodness. Right.
and then I started realizing I'm teaching a feminine philosophy, but if you look at the back end of my business, it was based in masculine concepts, right? And so that has really challenged me in a whole new way of really learning how to release this addiction to the hustle, to this worth, my self-worth tied to my doing, to my numbers, to my, to all of that. And so,
Can I just recap on that? My self-worth tied to my doing,
mhm,
because I think that there's so many people out there that can relate to that, because that was definitely, my early businesses that I built, my self-worth was 100% tied to my doing. It was all about like, if I, and then of course the deep disappointment if you didn't do enough, right? So then you get into the cycle of not enough.
yeah,
Once you're in that cycle of not enough, it's very, very hard to kind of start getting out of that, because it's a story that you tell, and the story then also starts to take on its own arms and legs and grow its own arms and legs. And before you know it, it's a story that is literally dogging you everywhere you go. Wherever you do, it's not enough. And it is hard, it is hard, takes a hard emotional toll on everything. Your self-esteem takes a knock. Obviously your self-worth is pretty much on the floor if you're not achieving, and all these things. So I love that you have conquered all of this and that you've like really stepped out of it. So
yeah.
tell
So
us a little
something
bit about
else,
the tree.
actually, something else that I think you would love is, so going back to like the plant analogy,
Yeah.
like, so plants work, they're cyclical, right? They're cyclical and they work in seasons. And, like us women, we are cyclical when we are cyclical humans, and our hormones work on a 28-day cycle. And so what's about the hustle energy is, if you think about our four phases of our body, if you are bleeding or not, you still have four phases, four hormonal cycles. There's four cycles with the moon, right? And our hormonal cycles also mirror the moon, which also mirror the four seasons of the planet. So this is really cool. So the moon is on a 28-day cycle. Our body is on a 28-day cycle. Now, the earth obviously is on a 365-day cycle, but all of the four cycles are similar. There is a spring phase, a summer phase, a fall phase, and a winter phase. So when you think about the great Mother Earth herself, and this has been a huge shift for me, is when I want to get into overdoing, when I want to get into, and I want to push my body, when she's very clearly saying it's time to rest, when I am in a fall or a winter phase of my cycle, or the moon is in the fall or winter phase of its cycle, because if you're not bleeding, you can always sync up to the energy of the moon. And I want to push, I remind myself that the great Mother Earth herself, the great Mother Earth herself cannot be in spring and summer all the time. So you are not designed to be in spring and summer all the time. But we live in a society that is obsessed with productivity. And so it's a constant reframing. And that's I can always translate things back to Mother Nature. And if I can witness Mother Nature, it helps me ground into the fact that I am cyclical and you are cyclical. Males are cyclical as well. They work on a 24-hour cycle, but still they are cyclical. They are designed to rest throughout the day. And so if that has been a huge shift for me, is like, if I just remember that, like, there is winter phases with Mother Earth and there are fall phases for a reason. And if they decided to power through and just do spring and summer, spring and summer, spring and summer, Mother Earth would burn out. She'd burn up. And so would my body, and so would I, like your personal experience with that. And so that has been a really great, it's like I look at a tree sometimes when I feel like I'm pushing, and I just breathe and I remind myself, okay, the great Mother Earth can't do it all the time, 24/7, 365. Like, neither can I. Rest is a part of it. And when you rest, you spring, right? You allow the spring to happen when you rest. And so yeah, that has
Oh, I
been a
love that you allow the spring to happen. So we call that, so of course we observe that here at Joanna Hunter HQ, and we call it the ebb and the flow. That
Mhm,
we need, for every flow that we have, we need an ebb. We need
mhm,
to come back home to ourselves, bring it all back in. The ebb is where we concentrate our energy again, and then we flow our energy out, which then dilutes the energy to a point where it then requires the ebb to bring it back to concentrate it again. And then we just ebb and flow in those cycles. So I love that the rest brings the spring. That feels, because that's exactly, because we say here that rest is a spiritual practice, because for me, it had to become a spiritual practice because I was so into the hustle.
mhm,
And being so into the hustle, I needed to create, spiritual practices for everything that I had not been supporting myself with, rest being one of the big things I hadn't supported myself with. So
mhm,
I had to see everything, like I had to convert everything into a spiritual into a spiritual thing, a spiritual practice. And then it was just like how I would sit on my meditation pillow and meditate was a practice. Then like things like rest became a practice, and stuff like that, because at first they felt so alien to me, because for years I'd lived so out of that way of being. And I love this spring. I can really feel that, because I know that if I'm tired and I do take that couple of days off and I disconnect and I unplug, so powerful. Like I come back like better than ever. My
mhm,
brain is bouncing with ideas. You're just like bursting forth just like spring. So I love this image I have in my head now. So
mhm.
tell us a little bit about your, obviously, so we've doubled these numbers, everything's looking hunky-dory. Inside you're like, ugh, I cannot do this again. So how do we make the shift? How did you start to shift more into the feminine energy? What was like after having that realization, I can't do this again like this,
Mhm.
did you feel that you had to start dismantling stuff in your business? Like maybe you had like because I spoke to Jana Kingsford on the podcast, and she had to dismantle all these like super expensive, super fancy funnels that she had.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
she was like, she's like, had to go on a mission to delete like basically what was bringing in her
Yep.
income. What was the same? Was it the same for
It
you?
was very similar. Like I built this business based on all these systems and structures. And I remember talking to a coach at that point who was definitely more feminine. And she's like, why don't you just stop doing business the way you are doing? And I was like, I don't think you understand. Like the way that I have it designed is I need to keep it in motion for basically a year to get everyone through the system. And it just felt like very overwhelming, but I had to basically blow up my business and start over. Truly, that's really what I had to do. And that sounds like very extreme, and some people are like, well, I can't do it. It was like it was a slow dismantling. I knew that I was shifting. I knew that I also was changing the branding. I was Wildly Alive weight loss for a long time, and then
Mhm.
I was ready to shift to Wildly Alive, which you could feel the energetic differences in both of
Oh,
those.
absolutely.
So
One feels so much heavier. Funnily
yeah.
enough, it was the weight loss one that feels heavier, but the other one feels so much lighter.
Yeah, exactly. And I was just ready to let go of being tied to weight loss because it just doesn't feel right anymore. And so so yeah, I started like rebranding and getting clear on like what Wildly Alive stood for. And then I just felt like so this one coach that I started with, she kind of blew up. So my whole online world was full of masculine women everywhere. I mean, everywhere was doing the exact things that I did to get to six figures. And so I felt very lost. I was not surrounded like women like you or like women like Melanie or Jana, none of those type of people. They were very just it was all I saw. And
Yeah,
so
me
I
too.
just
I was like, because I was so determined to grow my business from a feminine energy. And then when I came online, there was hardly anyone, like
Mhm,
everyone was like, get a funnel, do ads, da, 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 da,
mhm,
follow this super secret formula. And it was like, oh my God. And I was really searching. I think Denise Duffield Thomas was the first woman that I found who has the Lucky Bitch Boot Camp,
mhm,
that did like a kind of like a non-hustle way of being, and it was so beautiful to And I was like, oh, hallelujah, that there is people out there. And then slowly but surely I started attracting more and more people that were amazing role models. But
Mhm. Yeah.
how did you make the shift into start attracting more role models? Did you have to embody the energy first?
Well, I started asking the question. I think that was the big thing. I started asking the universe, like, show me a better way, because I just felt like there's got to be an easier way. Like, this cannot just be it. This cannot just be it. And so I did feel really lost. I was like, I need some evidence. I need to see some people, doing it. And yeah, I kind of just like started taking a pause and stepping back. Like, I was so structured. Like, I had my publishing schedule planned out for the whole year. Like, I had emails in the queue for months, like all of that. I just stopped all of that. And then what would happen is I would go on walks or hikes and I would start to have a download. I'd start to have this and I was like, ooh, that sounds really fun. Let's start doing that. And I kind of just fell into it a little bit, where I was like, I don't really have anything planned, because planning isn't something that I want to do anymore. And I actually kind of swung a little too much in the feminine, honestly, where everything was last minute. Everything was last minute. Oh, I have an idea. Let's do it now. And but it worked. I hit another six figures that way. But the truth is it was a little stressful for me and my assistant, because I was just like, oh, I have this new idea, and like, we just need to execute it really quickly. And so now I feel like I'm starting to learn the ebb and the flow, the masculine and feminine balance of
The
like having
balance.
some structure, but also having space for things to slip in as well. So I really, and I don't know if you ever talk about this, but I was a swinger for sure, where I went like super masculine and then I swung super feminine. And
Mm.
it's an imbalance, right? It's not, and so it wasn't extremely healthy either, because it can be in this way of like, I'm going to jump and the universe is going to support me and I'm not going to do anything, right? It's this
Right.
very surrendering, like too surrendering, like
Yeah,
kind
we
of
talk about that a lot. Like if the masculine, the way that I kind of put it together is, if the masculine gets direction from the masculine, it's doing plus doing, which equals exhaustion.
Mm,
If the feminine gets direction from the feminine, it's being, because masculine energy is doing, feminine energy is being, so it's being plus being. So it's like you're so laid back, like someone just feed me grapes, so nothing happens, right?
yeah.
But if the masculine gets direction from the feminine, the being, so what do I want to be, and that is given to the part of us that's masculine to do, then magic happens,
Mm,
because then we're really in that flow.
mm,
But I did exactly the same thing as you. In my before I opened this business, I in the recovery process, I was like, I was so rejecting of anything that was like a whiff of a plan,
mm,
because it was like so rigid, and I had been so rigid before, and everything and every moment of every day had been planned out for me. So I was like, no, I don't want that anymore. So I went exactly into the other extreme.
mm,
But it was really my program, Divine Planning Abundant Profits, which came through to me in 2016. And then as I brought that through that program, I realized like, oh, this is the structure, but it's loose enough for the feminine to just do her thing, but
mm,
it's strong enough to get consistent results. And I
mm.
was like, yes. And this is it. So I love that you've really, like, we've been on such a similar journey in a way. It's so beautiful to see that we've been on such a similar journey. So when you decided that, okay, no plan is not so good,
Mm.
we need a little bit of a plan, but we also need a plan that's loosey goosey enough in order for like inspiration to flow in there and things like that. How's that changed life now?
It's been super fun. It's been really great to have the space to act on intuition and like these ideas, like that was so fun for me, because I'm like a creative person
Mm-hmm.
and I like the ideas of it. And oh, I have this idea, and so being able to have the structure while knowing that, like, okay, around this time an idea will come through, and around this time an idea will come through to execute this, and really trusting in that, trusting in myself, trusting in my body, trusting in the universe, like trusting in all of that. It feels I mean, it's like almost hard to explain how it feels, because it's like you can breathe, like I want to just take a deep breath. Like, there was so much white knuckling
Mm.
going on. And I was just so stressed. I was so stressed. I was so worried. And I had my son. This was the breaking point for me, is I got pregnant, and we had bought a house with my husband and I and another person. And I was 6 months pregnant. We bought the house, we signed the papers, and the other person bailed. And I was so deeply triggered. I went into major hustle mode. I mean, 6 months pregnant, I was freaking out, all freaking out. And then I was like, work, 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 work. And my son came out, and I couldn't even connect with my own child, because I was just so stressed out about making sure that we can afford this house that we bought that we could not afford together. And it was a really hard part of my life, because I really couldn't even connect with my son, because I need to control this, like I need to make sure I'm going to be okay. There was no
Yeah,
trust,
I feel you.
you know? And so it's hard. I think it was hard as a mother to see that, wow, like, and that was, after my son was like 6 months old, that's when I just like, I was like, I can't do this. Like, I literally cannot do this. There has got to be a different way. That was the ultimate surrender for me. And I was really sick. I had postpartum depression. I lost a ton of weight. Like, like your breakdown, that was mine. I was in not a good place at all.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just it's rough, but liberating all at the same time, isn't it? Because you go through this, what I call a pattern interrupter.
Mhm.
Something comes along and it devastates you so much that it interrupts that little channel that little groove that you were in, that little pattern that you were in, and you're just repeating and rinsing and repeating, rinsing and repeating, and you're doing that pattern. And then all of a sudden it's like you something like literally puts you on your ass, and you're like, I cannot do this anymore. um and then I feel like the breakdown has to sometimes happen before the breakthrough,
Mhm.
you know. And the breakdown is, for me, is part of like the process, like, and you don't actually have to have like an actual legit nervous breakdown, but like the breakdown is part of the surrender process, surrendering to the idea that there might be another way out here. But up until then, you're exactly what you called it, white knuckling
Mhm.
the way forward. And you're so fixed and focused on like, this is the only way to do it. So, and then that thought, this is the only way to do it, has to break down so that a new thought, an easier way, can be birthed through it. And the
Mhm.
universe kind of knows that there's an easier way, right? And so it kind of like creates the circumstances that put you on your ass so that you can have the opportunity to birth the new way. And
Mhm.
it's only when you're on your ass. And and I always hope that when people listen to podcasts like this, or listen to when I talk about things like this, my hope, my dream is that if they hear our stories, that they avoid being put on their ass, and they make the choice, they make the change earlier,
Mhm.
catch the behavior earlier, and make the change and make the choice earlier. But it's not a bad thing to be put on your ass. It's painful at the time, it's hard, you wouldn't wish it on your worst enemy. But what comes out of it, like what has come out from me being put on my butt and having to completely and utterly rethink how I live my life and how I am and all the things,
Mhm.
has also been a magical birth of something
Mhm.
phenomenal, and reaching thousands and thousands of people on this globe, doing the world, doing the work that sets my soul on fire. And I'm so glad to hear that you found the way forward to balance that masculine and feminine energy. And how's that also affected? Because for me, in learning to balance the masculine and feminine energy, it's like literally affected every part of my life and being. Like once you learn how to begin to bring those into harmony, you start to see them. Like I found it's helped me in my relationships with my family.
Mhm.
It's helped me everywhere. Have you found the same?
Yeah. I mean, definitely in my marriage, like I had a tendency to be overly masculine in my marriage and, overly mothering. And the same thing in my mothering, with my son is like being more playful and having more fun and laughter, and all of that is really great. And, like the biggest thing for me is like when I start to realize that I'm getting into that overdrive, because it's a knee-jerk response, right? It's very automatic. And so even though I've been working really hard to rewire it, it's still there. It's still there in my most triggering experiences, in my most weakest moments. And so I used to say this about my body all the time is, when I have a client come to me and she's like, I feel really fat, it's like, okay, well, fat isn't a feeling. So, like, what's really going on? It's often because there's something else going on, and their body is the automatic target, because that's always been the easy target. Is like, oh, they had a fight with their partner, or they got dropped a deadline at work, and it was like, let's just talk about how gross and ugly and fat I am. So I'm like, that's actually a beautiful thing if you look at it through the perspective of, oh, this is just a sign for me that something is often in my life or in my mindset or in my lifestyle. And like, I just need to address the actual issue. So I see that same with my hustle is like, if I start to get into over hustle, if I start to get into overdrive, if I start to go down that road, it's like taking a breath and just breathing into, what is this really about? Because this is a trigger response, right? Same for when a woman just beats up her body. It's a trigger response. There's something going on in your life. There's something that you got triggered. And now your response
I
is
love
to,
this.
yeah.
This is gold because yes, you are so right. It is a knee-jerk trigger response. It is like, and it's the easy target, right? It's like your go-to, right? So if hustle was your go-to, the minute something is up in your life, you go to your go-to, right?
Right.
It's like yeah, it's it's sometimes, like when things are really crap, like you want to just go to your bed, right? Because why? Because it's your go-to, it's your safe place. So it's
Mm-hmm.
almost like the abusive self-talk.
Mm-hmm.
You just go to your safe place, which
Mm-hmm.
is like,
Comfortable.
unfortunately, either the hustle or blaming your body, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so powerful, because I think this insight will be amazing for the people that are in my $1 million lab, or the guys that are following along at home on in the $1 million experiment book, because you know, a big thing that we talk about is like approaching this whole experiment with playful curiosity. Do not make it heavy. Do not make it a hustle, because yeah, sure, you've got the plan. You can hustle your ass off to get there if you want to make $1 million in 1 year, but that is not the point of this experiment. The point of this experiment is to stay in the vibes of playful curiosity, is to stay in the vibes of intuition and mindset, and really get that, so that actually when we arrive at the goal of the $1 million, that we arrive at a goal that is pleasurable for us, that we actually have a life when we get there. It's not like like yourself, when you doubled your money and then was like, I have no life. Right. And it's so important that we get there, we get to the goal, and we have like this epic quality of life. So when you are now working in your business, how far in advance do you plan now? Do you, obviously you put some plans and things like that in place,
Mm-hmm.
but then you leave the schedule a little bit open as well for the fun stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I have a general idea of the program that we're going to be talking about each month-ish, but
Mhm.
how I deliver it and like the master classes are really open-ended, which of course, sometimes I'm like, what am I going to talk about right there? Like I don't like I sometimes start to freak a little bit of like worrying about like how I'm gonna deliver the masterclass, or what I'm gonna even say, or like even some of the programs are just kind of like, yeah, this is what we're talking about. I've been talking about it for years, but I have been very structured, even how I run my programs, and like got all the notes and the bullet points and all of that. And I've really let all of that go. Like I have a general idea. I have like 5 topics that I want to talk about. But really, what I have found is that if I have too many notes, it's not good for me because it cuts off the channel, because I'm just in my head all the time. And so I really I know the 5 topics. Sometimes it's like, yeah, I'm feeling into this topic today. And then I just let it flow. And the stuff that has been coming through has just been like mind blowing. And, like everyone talks about channeling. And I remember like 3 months ago being like, what is this channel thing? Like, can I be a channel? Like, I don't know. Can I? And I just started asking, like, I want to be a channel. I want to be a channel. I got some stones that are good for channeling and, breathing and like imagining the channel opening before I start talking and things like that. And I feel like I've had it, because sometimes I get off coaching calls and I'd be like, I said that. I don't even know where that came from, And so I realized that's channeling. And so with my program structures, it's a lot of surrender and trust. But what I have realized is like some of the content that comes out of my mouth, I'm like, I'm channeling. I didn't even realize. And so that's been a lot of the feminine pieces where structurally I have my year planned, but like when it comes to deliverable of the content, I trust.
You leave it open to the trust and everything. That's very much how I work. I download all my programs, I channel, all my new programs are all channeled this year, and it's a beautiful way to work. It is an absolutely beautiful way to work, because what I find is that it's like the content morphs to the people who are like, you have an idea of what it is that you're going to be talking about in the program, right? But it's like the content morphs for the students who are in that particular container. And it's like, it's just so perfect for those students to get, they just get what they need in that. And it's like the messages are almost tailor-made. And I've had people that have private messaged me after my classes and said things like, did you know that about me? Or did you? And I'm like, no. But that message was so perfect for me. And I was like, it sure was, but it was perfect for me too. And I think if we went and interviewed everybody else in the class, they probably were like, oh my God, that was perfect for me as well. And that's the piece that I love, is that, spirit, source, whatever you want to call it, it has such a bigger picture to weave from. And if you're willing to be its channel, the perfection that will come through that is just, it blows my mind, because it's gorgeous. And I, like you, I get, my team often ends up having to transcribe bits and pieces. I'm like, I want to keep that, grab that piece from that video, because like, oh my God, I need to hear that again.
Yeah. So like, it's an invitation to everyone to just don't read off your notes so much, because I was totally that person where I would like, I mean, I wouldn't like necessarily transcribe and read word by word, but I definitely had a lot of bullet points. And I would just invite you to play around, like just start with something small, because what just organically happens, it really is magical. And I didn't really realize it until I started doing more Facebook Lives I used to like pre-record them, and then I started doing Facebook Lives, and then that's when I felt like things started coming through a little bit better for me. But not relying on the slideshow, not relying on that, and just like really letting myself be front and center and talk is as what has really, really up-leveled my content to the point where I'm like, whoa, I need to start charging more for this, because this is really good.
I love it. And just as we're kind of wrapping up here, we always ask people, do you think mindset and intuition with $1 million plan can make someone a millionaire? What's your thoughts on that? We love to hear.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, your intuition lives in your body, and I'm a huge fan of your body, right? And so like, your intuition and your body being the launching pad of anything that you desire, I am 100% behind that. It's just like, yeah, getting the subconscious in line with what you desire is key, because your intuition can feel it and you can go here, but if you don't have the tools to work through this and the triggers and the coding and the programming and all of that, then it could be really hard to trust your intuition. But I think over time, and anybody here watching, you all have a few moments in your life where you trust the nudge in your body. And people say it all the time when you become a mom. They're like, trust your mommy gut, trust your mommy gut. And I loved that. But what also kind of bugged me is like, you say trust your mommy gut with your little being that you love so much, but you don't trust it with yourself, and you don't trust it with how you eat and how you move. And so it just goes to show we have some more work to do, because there's a lot of, in terms of your relationship with your body, there's a lot of programming that happens around good food and bad food, and good ways of exercising and bad ways of exercising. And that's not really how health works. It works from a very intuitive point. And it's like, if it doesn't feel good to you, don't eat it. If it doesn't feel good to you, don't move, don't do, like if you hate the treadmill, don't treadmill. Like, it's very simple, but we've been kind of brainwashed that we need to be following
the logic.
Instead of the heart.
So before we really wrap up, I would love, could you give us one tip or something like that? If you are listening to this podcast, you maybe are struggling with your body, you are struggling to listen maybe to your intuition, you're maybe struggling to connect with your body, maybe you're at war with your body. If you're listening to this, some people might be. What would be one tip that you could start the ball rolling? What could every human being do to start that ball rolling in improving their relationship? If you could give just maybe I know there's probably 100 tips, but if you could give one tip for someone listening to this today, how they can start making peace with their body and really start moving in the direction of really honoring this, in the most, I always call our body the most incredible thing you'll ever own.
Yeah. Well, honestly, one of the best ways to do it, and I've been doing it all through here, is skin to skin contact on your body.
Okay.
Touch your body, and breathe and close your eyes and feel your heartbeat, and just really feel your heartbeat, and just recognize that this thing that you have access to all the time, she's giving to you all the time. When you decide to not give her enough water, or not enough sleep, or force her to power through and drink a lot of caffeine, or you look in the mirror and you start picking apart her, she is bum 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 bum
Doing
bum
all the work
all the time. She is here for you, selflessly giving to you 24/7, 365. She loves you, and she wants to be on the same team with you. And if you could see that all she's doing is doing the best with what she has, you start to realize, and you see that she's a living bump 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 bump. She's a living, breathing, feeling thing. You actually want to care for her. You don't want to work out just because she needs to be smaller, or I'm going to eat this salad because, I want to have a smaller butt, it's, like you were saying before, it's not love right away, because it's hard to get to love that quickly. It's respect. When you're like, oh, okay, you're still moving and shaking, and you're still waking up, and you're still doing all these things for me, even though I haven't given you adequate water for years. Oh gosh, so sorry, I'm going to come back to that, and seeing that she's always giving to you and she's just doing the best with what she has. And so how can you give her a little better so she can give you a little better? And this is where the whole team starts to come into play. Is you want to eat healthy, you want to eat foods that are best for your body because you respect her, not because you are wanting to manipulate her. Right. And so it's this deep, profound relationship in respect. And then, yes, if you can get to a place of love, that's amazing. You don't have to worry about that now. It's just respect.
It's easy to get to the place of love when you've got the respect, right?
Yeah.
But but trying to get to the place of love with no respect, nigh on impossible.
Yeah.
So I love this. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Tell everybody who's listening to this, how can they find you on the interwebs? I've got a feeling you're going to find a lot of new fans, because this is this is the work that sets my soul on fire. You know, you're doing very similar work to mine, but I come at it from a very different way. I teach business and all the things.
Mhm.
I love that you're teaching this about the body and really like connecting in. And so how can they find you? Where are you on the internet?
Yeah, you can. I think the best place to go is to wildlyalive.com. And you can take a personalized quiz, and then you get a movement and meditation based on you and your body. And there you could connect with me on Facebook or Instagram. Of course, I'm on social media as well, but it's the same thing, like, and I have talked to Melanie about my business, and it's like, this is a it's the same thing. It's the same thing that business owners are teaching, this very feminine approach. It's the same thing with the body. Is like, I want to revolutionize the health industry, that when a woman looks in the mirror and doesn't like what she sees, instead of automatically going into shame and dieting, she just breathes and she says, what are you trying to tell me? I'm here, I'm listening, I'm back, and just like come back to yourself, because then you'll find a way to be healthy for the rest of your life, and you won't be on and off and on and off and on and off and hating and shame and hustling and grinding and counting and
So,
all of that.
so important to come back. I think that was a big key in my recovery, was listening to myself.
Mhm.
And it began by listening to my body, listening
Mhm.
to what it was telling me, listening, taking a nap when it was saying, I'm tired.
Yeah.
And that was like, instead of grab a coffee,
Mm-hmm.
and I think, it is, and it is the road less traveled, unfortunately, now, but hopefully the groundwork that guys like you are doing is going to, really, really revolutionize a whole industry for our children and our children's children. So I just want to say thank you so much, Nichole, for joining us. This has been illuminating. There's been so many golden nuggets in here. If you're listening to this on YouTube, make sure that you subscribe to get more of this. If you are in the $1 Million Experiment, leave us a comment. And if you're on iTunes, Spotify, or iHeartRadio, or any other places where we syndicate this podcast, do leave us a review and tell us what was your favorite nugget from Nichole's interview.